Hello and welcome to the Energy Medicine podcast. Today we're going to be looking at plantar fasciitis and how you stand, how you walk with plantar fasciitis and how you can help alleviate a lot of the pain and a lot of the discomfort and explain why that happens. My name's Stephen Grinnell from Energy Medicine and I've been treating plantar fasciitis for over 11 years. I have a pain clinic based in Stratford-upon-Avon, and I probably see about 12 to 14 people a week on treatment plans for plantar fasciitis. So the two main problems with plantar fasciitis are standing up and walking, which obviously are two things that are really important. So we're going to start with standing. I've talked a little bit about this in previous podcasts. But when you load your foot, when you stand up, you put roughly 90% of your body weight goes through your ankle bone and into your heel area, which is where the fascia is at its thickest, at its shortest, and under its most pressure. Also mentioned that the foot has lots and lots of different muscles in it, basically 4 layers of tissue along with 26 bones, and the idea is that the muscles of the foot allow you to have lots of balance, movement, coordination, jumping, shock absorption, all of these sorts of things, but all the pressure then goes onto the heel when you stand. So standing is a static position, so all the muscles are in a fixed place, so they're not contracting or relaxing, they're all what they call fixators at that point, which means that you can rock a little bit and you can stand very still, but you start to move slightly backwards and forwards and just regaining your balance. Now within that, obviously if none of the muscles are contracting, all of your weight then goes through on the sort of skeletal system, but also then your ligaments, tendons, and obviously supportive structures. And in the foot's case, this is going to be the plantar fascia. Now, all of those things are normal. Our feet are designed to do that. We can stand for extended periods of time. When you have plantar fasciitis, the muscles that help support the fascia are a little bit weaker, and the fascia itself is slightly thicker and it's got damage. So if it's got damage, it's obviously going to hurt if you're standing with 90% of your body weight. And the key thing to remember here that it's proportional. So if you're heavier, you've got stronger fascia in the sense of you've got more of it and you're structurally allowed to obviously move your body around. If you're lighter, again, it's proportional in the same way. So within that, things like losing weight and everything else obviously help for lots of other health reasons, and it might help longer term with plantar fasciitis, but it's not the sort of main focus. So when you stand up, you've got a lot less muscle support. So within muscle support, that obviously takes away some of the pressure. So what you tend to do is when you've got plantar fasciitis is you move around a lot. You don't stand in a static place. I always use the term, you look like you're on hot bricks. So people are constantly transferring their body weight, or they stand where they stand like a flamingo and they stand on one leg. So how that works is obviously you balance everything on one leg and you take all the pressure off the other one. And obviously you can do that for quite extended periods of time, but it's not going to help obviously the fascia healing, moving or anything else. The other problem is that the main muscle in the back part of your leg, your calf muscle, so your soleus and your gastrocnemius, they connect to the Achilles tendon. Now, a lot of people with plantar fasciitis tend to have quite tight Achilles tendons, so they're quite tight there. We've already said that people tend to walk more on their toes or more on the flat foot. So 90-degree bend is quite extreme relatively. So that puts that muscle under quite a lot of tension. So even though while you're standing and not using the muscle, as it's working as a fixator, it still puts quite a lot of pressure on the back part of the fascia. So how can you alleviate that while standing? Well, if you look at your foot and you think about your foot, one of the things that I've talked a lot about is having everything square. So if your foot's nice and straight, obviously then the loading for your foot on the outer edge, the middle part and the inner edge, the arch, is going to be consistent. So at least it's evenly distributed relative to your body weight. A lot of people stand with their feet turned out sort of 10 to 2 position. And the reason you do that is it's more dynamic and it's more balanced, so it allows you to turn left and right. But what that does then is it changes the emphasis of where the load is. So there's more load on the outer edge and less load on the inner edge. So depending on where you've got damaged fascia, sometimes it's better to turn your feet slightly inwards, sometimes it's better to turn them slightly outwards. And how I tend to work with people is I get everybody to stand with their feet dead square. Now, the other thing that you can do is if your feet are dead square and it still hurts, it's really key then to stand with your feet slightly further apart. What that does then is it makes the loading come to the inner part of your foot, more towards your arches. If you're still struggling, if you bring your feet closer together and stand with your feet closer together, it brings the loading to the outer edge of your foot, so a little bit more weight goes through there, and again that can make a difference. Now for ladies, one of the things that I've found working with quite a lot of people is if you're in a static position, say you've got a service job, so a good example is you say working in a shop or a reception or something like that, you can get away with wearing a heel, and what that does then is it alters the loading by supporting your foot, but it allows you to put more of the weight through your toes. So if you're putting your weight through your toes, if you wear a 2-inch heel, say a wedge or something like that, what it does then is it does, if you're in a static position, take some of the weight off your fascia, so that helps while you're at work, because as I said, everybody's got to still work and move. So the key things for standing, just standing, are feet nice and square as a starting point. How does that feel? Feet slightly further apart. How does that feel? Feet slightly closer in. How does that feel? Do I need to twist my foot slightly in, or do I need to twist my foot slightly out? So there's 5 things for you to try there to help make a difference while you're standing. And those things make quite a big difference, particularly if you've got to stand for quite a long period of time. Now, a bigger issue is people standing up. Okay, so if you're sitting down, whether it's first thing in the morning, common, very, very high. We've talked about the fact that the fascia has healed over the evening and at night because you've been resting, it's had no load on it. And then you put your foot down on the floor, stand up, and it's 90% plus of your body weight. It's actually more than that, but the actual loading, if you work on that, is 90% with this 90 degrees. Now you've got lots of other supporting ligaments, tendons and structure of the foot to obviously help. So one of the things I recommend is for you to do almost like a mini warm-up routine first thing in the morning and actually just get your ankle moving, bending up and downwards, and you've got that sort of 5-10 seconds to start. And then when you stand up, to stand and put your toe on the floor if you're injured foot, and then stand up and put more loading on your opposite foot. So the idea is that you don't put as much weight as you stand initially through the injured foot, so it's slightly on your toe, so your heel's off the ground, so most of the weight goes through the toe, but the majority of your body weight, 60-70%, is going through your good side. That's not always the case, it's just a case of which one hurts least. The benefit of doing that is that when you do that, if you do that through the day, so you're sitting down, you're in the office, you've been having a conversation, you've been on the telephone, you've got to go and find somebody. At that point, when you stand up, you'll have been in rest mode. And when you sit down, 80% of your nerve communication shuts down, so it reduces. So if the nerve communication reduces, as soon as you go to stand up, it's got to increase by 80% to allow you to have all the coordination to stand up. And when you stand up, the loading on your knees and your lower body is roughly 7 times your body weight, which is why standing is quite a hard exercise, particularly as people get older. Again, the same principle, so it's to have your foot slightly forward, so you put more of your body weight on your toe. The other thing that's also important is to bring that opposite foot slightly further back, and again, as you stand up, you put more of your weight on your better side. I say good side, but it's the one that's hurting the least. In doing those things, you've got a standing up and down routine, first thing in the morning and then when you're at work or just normal activity, and then 5 different foot positions. What it does, it helps you identify where the most painful element of the fascia is and where the least painful area is. Once you've identified that, you can then modify how you stand, if you're static for a period of time, on how you move forward, so you can stand and say, right, I need to stand with my feet slightly further apart. I'll think about that, take some of the pressure off, allows the fascia to heal more, reduces the pain, enables you to do more activity. So that's the first major thing. The second thing to look at is walking. Now, walking's quite a complex movement. There's quite a lot of things going on with it. And what a lot of people do when they start walking as a child is that you just basically put yourself off balance and then recover. So by bringing a foot forwards, you take balance away, so therefore you have to stop yourself falling over, and you sort of stumble step initially, and then it becomes more refined. Now within that, most people only ever consider walking, their walking style, when they've either had an injury, which is the most common, or if they're training for a particular sport, or they're an athlete or that type of thing, where they're having to do something a little bit different and they work with a coach. Now, if you think about that, most of the time, and you might never have an injury, bear in mind we're talking about plantar fasciitis, it does affect quite a high percentage of the population, about 10%, but it tends to be people that are either more active or very inactive and then suddenly become active. So within that, again, it's still quite a small group. So the majority of people don't have a problem because their mobility status allows them to do what they want to do, and they don't overstress it. So the area is when you overstress something, the muscles aren't strong enough, therefore the fascia can hurt. But that can be the same for a knee or for a shoulder, or if you do some gardening, you can hurt your back in the same way as if you go on a long walk, you can hurt your foot. So it's about building up to things, and that's one of the problems with any sort of rehabilitation. Now walking, it's important to look at your sequence. Now I've stressed that a lot of people, when they walk with plantar fasciitis, whether they're like that naturally or whether it's because they've modified their gait because of the fasciitis, they tend to walk slightly flat-footed or slightly on their toes. The other thing that they tend to do is they tend to take short strides, which is important because it means you don't overload the feet. And they also tend to take strides where they swing from their hips. So those sort of elements are sort of key areas. One of the things that I try and get people to do is to walk feet nice and straight, so everything's all square, feet slightly further apart than they would normally walk or stand, and also then for them to take slightly shorter steps, but to focus on placing their heel down first each time, so they really bring their toes up, straighten out their leg, put their heel down. Now that seems really, really counterintuitive. I've got pain in my heel, so now you're focusing to get the heel down. By doing that, what it does is two things. Firstly, it starts to get you to use your knee and hip properly in your walking style. The second thing it does is it resets everything at a starting point. So as you bring your foot up, you're stretching all your Achilles. By stretching your Achilles, that tendon at the back part of your heel, you're allowing it to relax to its normal state. And by lifting your toes up, you're already hitting that 90 degrees. So it's like a warm-up position. You then gradually put your foot down, transfer your body weight so it comes flat, and then you push off from your toes. The push off from the toes, a lot of people don't do because they take short strides and they walk slowly. As people walk quicker, rather than lengthening their strides, what they do is they just speed them up, so they increase the turnover. Now with plantar fasciitis, the range that people can walk varies hugely. Some of it depends on what you're walking for. I find a lot of dog walkers can go out for 20 minutes even if it's painful, because it's important to walk their dog. If you've got to say take the kids to school and that's a short walk, again the same, people will do that. What people tend to find is if they walk, say, for an hour, they struggle to do that distance and it reduces quite significantly. Or if they have to walk to the shops or the bus or the train or whatever else. So those sort of elements are where people really notice the distance. The next group of people struggle because of the way the fascia is damaged, actually just walking around the house. So you've got to look at those two phases. And I work very much on doing short distances first, because that's got to be the most important feature to look at. And we start very much on 3 minutes. So we get somebody to do some walking and they practice some of their gait cycles for 3 minutes. So they walk out of their house, they walk down the road for 90 seconds. They then turn around and walk back. The whole focus is looking at, right, I've got to put my heel down, I've got to take short strides, I've got to have my feet nice and straight, and they're a little bit further apart. So all of those elements again are going to have a very big impact on how you walk. Now lots of people try this, they do it a couple of times and go, oh, I can't do that, it's too painful. But your foot's painful anyway, so it's about trying something different to alter how it loads, but practice it. The first time you do anything, it's going to feel weird, your balance is off, movement's off. So those sort of things are really, really important to consider when you try something. The other thing to look at is that you do lots and lots of short distance walking. So you might walk from one room to the house to the other. You might then walk down to the garden. You might go and empty the bins, and that's just around the house. Obviously, if you then go outside, you're walking considerably further with a higher rate of steps. So for 3 minutes, you're looking at around 200 steps. So that's 100 steps one way, 100 steps the other, and that 90 seconds. A progression from that is 6 minutes, which is roughly doubling the time, and I've talked a little bit about magnitude before, but it's 100% more. So it's really to think about it on that level. And then the next phase that I get people to do is 9 minutes. So those three elements, the magnitude increases quite significantly. And bear in mind that I work with people that struggle to walk 5 or 6 meters initially. So it's about building it up. Now, I talk a lot about magnitude and percentages rather than actual steps or time, because it's a better measure when you've got a problem, because it's really difficult to say, oh, I normally walk from here to there and I can't do it. If you can do that, that's brilliant. But if you can get halfway and then you can't go any further, you're stuck. So it's almost about like building yourself up to be able to walk that distance, which is why we look at this 3 minutes, 6 minutes, and then 9 minutes. Once you can do 9 minutes of focused walking, you're in quite a good place, because that's quite a long time. That's about 600 steps. So you're actually making quite a lot of progress. You're doing a reasonable distance. The other area that people struggle with hugely is stairs. And the reason they struggle with stairs isn't so much going up in some ways, it's coming down, because obviously we all worry about falling downstairs. So what I get everybody to do if they're struggling with stairs is to face the stairs, to make sure they go as much on their toes as they can, and they put one foot up, then they meet it with their other foot. So the key thing is to put your good foot up first, so the one that's least injured, and then load that foot and bring your other foot up to meet it. Load that foot up, other foot up to meet it, load that foot up, other foot to meet it. So you're facing the stairs and you're holding on to the banisters. The key thing coming downstairs, particularly when you've got an injury, is not to put too much stress on it. So the stress is on your knees and your ankles when you go upstairs, when you do alternate steps, is around 3 times your body weight. When you come downstairs, because you're facing the opposite way around and the loading's different and you bend your knees and ankles differently, the loading's about 5 times your body weight. So to reduce that, what I tell people to do is to face the stairs as if they were going up, but to come backwards down the stairs, again on their toes, so that it's the least loaded on the heel part of the body. You can keep the heels out of the way, don't put any loading on them at all, and all the weight then goes through the toes, because you can lean forward, hold on to your banisters. As you step down the steps, again, it's exactly the same. Okay, so you put your weaker foot down first, so the one that's most injured, you get that planted. You then put the next one down next to it, again the same, again the same. So the process is exactly the same, it's just reversed. So what that does then is it reduces the load on the fascia hugely, and that's mainly for people that struggle with stairs, and it's a really good way to build up the foot at the same time. But obviously you can hold on, obviously you need to take your time, and by walking downstairs that way, it slows everything. The main disadvantage is it's very difficult to carry things while you're in that process. But you've got to think about, obviously I'm trying to build my foot up, and you can do that as a structured exercise in the same way. And that's something that people don't always consider. So the key thing to think about, when you're standing, you've got 5 different options about moving your foot around, and that changes the loading. When you sit to stand, so you're sitting down and you stand up, it's about offsetting your feet, so put your one slightly further forward than the other. The one that's hurt, you should put forwards, onto your toes, and then stand up using your supporting legs so it's a little bit further back. When you're walking, short strides, feet nice and square, potentially slightly further apart, short steps using your heels, and start with 3 minutes. Build up to 6, build up to 9. The next phases are looking at things like drive phase, extended range, everything else. But that's really a progression. But what that will do is reset your body so that your knee, your ankle and your hip are all in the right place, and it's completely opposite to how you walk. So it's actually stretching everything that you've got there, which will reduce the pain quite quickly. Right then, thanks very much for today. We've got some more stuff coming up soon over the next few weeks, but I really wanted to focus on walking and standing.